The wind howled through the purple sky of Callus 7 as Jiwon Park checked her scanner one more time. The crystalline rocks around her glowed faintly in the dim light of the distant sun. She had been walking for 3 hours now, collecting samples from the canyon walls. This was supposed to be a simple geological survey, nothing special, nothing dangerous. Jiwon wiped the dust from her visor and looked at the readings on her device. Something was off. The scanner showed unusual heat signatures coming from a cave about 50 meters ahead. She frowned. The caves in this region were supposed to be empty. No animals lived this far out in the shattered canyons. The environment was too harsh, too cold, too lifeless. She moved closer, her boots crunching on the loose rocks. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. Jiwon hesitated for a moment. Protocol said she should call for backup before investigating unknown locations. But the research outpost was 2 hours away and she was curious. Besides, it was probably just a malfunction in her scanner. The inside of the cave was darker than she expected. Jiwon activated the light on her helmet and stepped forward carefully. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing smooth stone walls covered in strange markings. She recognized them immediately. Her heart began to race. These were Vilhari claw marks. The Vilhari were dangerous. Everyone knew that. They were massive creatures, standing 3 meters tall with scales that glowed in the dark. They had claws that could tear through metal and telepathic powers that could crush a human mind. Humans avoided them whenever possible. The few encounters between the two species had ended badly. Jiwon's hand moved to the emergency beacon on her belt. She should leave now. She should call security. But then she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it. A soft chirping noise, weak and desperate. She moved deeper into the cave, following the sound. The light from her helmet bounced off the walls until it landed on something small huddled in the corner. Jiwon gasped. It was a baby. A Vilhari infant, no bigger than a human child. The creature's scales were supposed to glow with bright colors. But these were dim and flickering like a dying flame. The infant's eyes opened slowly, looking at Jiwon with a gaze that seemed too aware, too intelligent. It chirped again, a pitiful sound that made Jiwon's chest tighten. The baby was dying. Anyone could see that. Jiwon knelt down beside the infant, her mind racing. She scanned the area with her light. There were signs of a struggle. Deep claw marks gouged the cave walls. Dried blood stained the rocks. And leading away from the cave, she could see tracks. Large tracks. The mother had been here and she had left. The scanner in Jiwon's hand beeped. She looked at the readings. The mother had departed approximately 18 hours ago. 18 hours. This baby had been alone, cold, and starving for almost a full day. Jiwon sat back on her heels, staring at the dying infant. Protocol was clear. Do not interfere with alien species. Do not make contact with the Vilhari. Do not risk an interspecies incident. The rules had been drilled into her head since she arrived on Callus 7. If she touched this creature, if she tried to help it, she could lose her job. She could face criminal charges. She could start a war. But as she looked at the infant's dimming scales and heard its weak chirps, she knew she couldn't walk away. Jiwon had become a xenobiologist because she wanted to understand alien life, to bridge the gap between species. How could she claim to care about alien life if she let this baby die alone in a cave? She made her decision quickly before she could change her mind. Jiwon pulled the thermal blanket from her emergency pack and wrapped it carefully around the infant. The creature was lighter than she expected and cold, so cold. Its scales felt rough against her gloved hands, but it didn't try to bite or scratch. It just looked at her with those strange, intelligent eyes. Jiwon stood up, cradling the infant against her chest. Her AI assistant immediately activated, its voice sharp in her helmet. Warning. You are violating First Contact Protocol. Warning. Vilhari are classified as dangerous. Warning. Return the creature immediately. Override, Jiwon said firmly. Medical emergency. I'm invoking the Preservation of Life clause. That clause does not apply to potentially hostile species, the AI responded. Administrator Choi must be notified. Then notify her, Jiwon said, already moving toward the cave entrance. But I'm not leaving this baby to die. The walk back to the outpost was the longest of Jiwon's life. She moved as quickly as she could without jostling the infant too much. The creature made small sounds occasionally, pressing closer to her for warmth. Through the thermal blanket, she could feel its heart beating rapidly, too rapidly. It was fighting to stay alive. Jiwon's mind raced with questions. Why had the mother left? Velhari were known to be fiercely protective of their young. What could have forced a mother to abandon her child? Was the mother coming back? And if she did come back, what would happen when she found humans had taken her baby? The research outpost appeared on the horizon just as the sun began to set. The buildings looked small and fragile against the vast purple sky. Ji-won quickened her pace. She needed to get the infant to her lab. She needed to find a way to save its life. As she approached the main gate, she could see someone waiting. Dr. Hyun Kim stood with his arms crossed, his face visible even from a distance. He did not look happy. Ji-won took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. She had broken the most important rule on Callus 7. She had interfered with the Velhari, and now she had to face the consequences. But as she looked down at the dying infant in her arms, at its dimming scales and labored breathing, she knew she would make the same choice again. The gate opened, and Ji-won walked through, carrying her burden. Behind her, the purple sky darkened. Somewhere out in the shattered canyons, a mother had made an impossible choice, and now Ji-won had made one too. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. Hyun Kim watched Ji-won approach the gate with something wrapped in her arms, and he knew immediately that his friend had done something reckless. Again. He had known Ji-won for 6 years, ever since they both arrived on Callus 7 fresh from Earth. In that time, he had seen her break protocol more times than he could count, always in the name of scientific curiosity or compassion. But this was different. He could tell by the way she held the bundle so carefully, by the determination in her eyes. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is," Hyun said as Ji-won reached him. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled back the thermal blanket just enough for him to see. Hyun's breath caught in his throat. The Velhari infant's scales flickered weakly, casting pale blue and green shadows on Ji-won's face. "Have you lost your mind?" Hyun hissed, looking around to see if anyone else had noticed. "Do you have any idea what Administrator Choi will do when she finds out?" "She already knows," Ji-won said calmly. "My AI sent an automatic alert. I don't care about Choi right now, Hyun. This baby is dying. I need your help." Hyun wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell Ji-won to take the creature back where she found it and forget this ever happened. But he had been a doctor for 15 years and his oath was clear. Life was life, whether human or alien. He looked at the infant's dimming scales and made his own choice. My lab, now. Before anyone else sees. They moved quickly through the outpost corridors. Most of the staff were in the cafeteria for evening meal, which gave them a small window of opportunity. Hyun's medical lab was on the 3rd floor of the research building. It was small but well equipped, with machines that could analyze almost any form of biological matter. Ji-won laid the infant on the examination table as gently as she could. Under the bright lights, the creature looked even worse. Its scales were almost completely dark now. Its breathing was shallow and irregular. Hyun immediately began running scans. "Temperature is dropping fast," he said, reading the displays. "The creature is hypothermic. Heart rate is way too high. Signs of severe dehydration and malnutrition." He paused, studying another screen. "Ji-won, I don't even know where to begin. We have almost no data on Velhari biology. I don't know what this species eats. I don't know what medicine it can tolerate. I don't even know its normal body temperature." "Then we figure it out," Ji-won said firmly. She was already at her workstation, pulling up every file the research station had on the Velhari. There wasn't much. The species avoided contact with humans and most observations had been made from a distance. Hyun worked quickly, setting up heating lamps to raise the infant's temperature slowly. Too fast could cause shock. He started an IV line with basic saline solution, hoping that water was water no matter the species. The infant chirped weakly when he inserted the needle, but it was too weak to fight. "We need to give her a name," Ji-won said suddenly. "We can't keep calling her it or the creature." "Her?" Hyun asked. "Yes, the scans show female anatomy, I think." Ji-won looked at the infant's dimming scales. "Let's call her Lumi, because her light is fading and we're going to bring it back." Hyun nodded. It was better than nothing. "Okay, Lumi, let's see if we can help you." The next 6 hours were the hardest of Hyun's career. He tried everything he could think of to stabilize Lumi's condition. The heating lamps helped with the hypothermia, and the saline kept her from complete dehydration, but she was still starving. Without proper nutrition, she would die within hours. Ji-won worked alongside him. analyzing tissue samples and comparing them to every database she could access. The Velhari biology was unlike anything she had seen before. Their cells used a different protein structure. Their blood carried oxygen in a unique way. Standard human food would be poison to them. "Look at this," Jiwan said around midnight, pointing at her screen. Velhari scales contain high concentrations of crystalline minerals, the same minerals found in the canyon rocks on Callus 7. Hyun came over to look. "You think they eat the rocks?" "No, but maybe they need those minerals in their diet, like how humans need calcium." Jiwan's fingers flew over the keyboard. "If we could synthesize a formula with the right minerals and proteins." They worked together, combining chemicals and compounds from the lab stores. It took dozens of failed attempts. Lumi grew weaker with each passing hour. Her chirps became quieter. Her scales barely glowed at all. Finally, as the sun began to rise outside, they created something that might work. A thick, nutrient-rich paste that contained synthesized proteins similar to what the Velhari might eat, combined with the crystalline minerals from Callus 7. Hyun loaded the mixture into a feeding tube. "This is our last shot," he said quietly. Jiwan held Lumi's small head steady as Hyun carefully inserted the tube. The infant didn't react. For a terrible moment, they thought they were too late. Then Lumi's throat moved, swallowing the formula. Once. Twice. They waited, barely breathing. Minutes passed like hours. Then slowly one of Lumi's scales flickered with a faint blue light. Then another, and another. "It's working," Jiwan whispered. "Hyun, it's working." By morning, Lumi's scales were glowing with soft blue and green colors. Her breathing had steadied. Her temperature was back in what they hoped was the normal range. She was still weak, but she was alive. Jiwan sat beside the examination table, her hand resting gently on Lumi's side. She was exhausted but couldn't stop smiling. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved her. The lab door slid open with a hiss. Administrator Daeun Choi stood in the doorway, her face hard as stone. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at Lumi, then at Jiwan, then back at Lumi. "Explain," Choi said in a voice that could freeze water. Jiwan stood up, meeting the administrator's gaze. "I found her abandoned in the shattered canyons. She was dying. I couldn't leave her there." "You violated protocol," Choi said flatly. "You endangered this entire outpost by bringing a Velhari here. Do you understand what you've done? If the mother comes looking for her offspring, we could all be killed." "The mother left her," Jiwan said. "She abandoned her own child. Why would she come back?" "We don't know why the Velhari do anything," Choi snapped. "That's the point. We don't understand them. We don't have treaties with them. And you just invited one into our home." Hyun stepped forward. "With respect, Administrator, the infant is stable now. She's not dangerous. She's barely the size of a human child. For now," Choi said. "What happens when she grows? What happens when she becomes an adult Velhari, with all their strength and telepathic powers? Have you thought about that?" Jiwon had, but she didn't have good answers. She just knew that leaving Lumi to die would have been wrong. Choi was silent for a long moment, studying Lumi's glowing scales. Finally, she spoke. "You have 48 hours to return that creature to where you found it. If the mother comes back, fine. If not, at least we'll have done our duty. But I will not risk this outpost for one alien infant. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear," Jiwan said, though she had no intention of obeying. Choi turned and left, the door sliding shut behind her. Hyun let out a long breath. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Jiwan looked down at Lumi, who was sleeping peacefully now, her scales pulsing with gentle light. "I'm going to find out why her mother left her. And I'm going to make sure Lumi survives no matter what it takes." Hyun shook his head, but he was smiling slightly. "You're going to get us both fired." "Probably," Jiwan agreed. "But we'll save a life first." Jiwan stood at the entrance to the shattered canyons once again, but this time she wasn't alone. Min-ho Kang, the outpost's head of security, stood beside her with his rifle ready. He was a quiet man in his early 40s, built like a soldier, and with the scars to prove it. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. "I still think this is a bad idea," Min-ho said, scanning the horizon with his tactical visor. "If the mother is out here, we're in serious danger." "I need to understand why she left Lumi," Jiwan said, adjusting her pack. There has to be a reason. Velhari are supposed to be protective of their young. Something forced her to abandon her baby. Minho grunted, but didn't argue further. He had his orders from Administrator Choi to escort Jiwon and make sure she didn't do anything else reckless. The fact that he thought this entire mission was reckless didn't seem to matter. They made their way back to the cave where Jiwon had found Lumi. In the daylight, the area looked different. Jiwon could see details she had missed before. The claw marks on the cave walls weren't just random. They formed patterns almost like writing or territorial markers. "Look at this," Jiwon said, running her scanner over the marks. "These are fresh, maybe 2 or 3 days old, and there's more than one set." Minho knelt down, examining the ground outside the cave. "Multiple tracks here. At least 3 different Velhari, maybe more. And signs of a fight." He pointed to where the rocks were disturbed, where dried blood stained the ground in several places. Jiwon's scanner beeped as she analyzed the blood samples. 2 different DNA signatures, both Velhari, but not related to each other. She looked at Minho. This wasn't just the mother leaving. There was a battle here. They followed the tracks away from the cave. The trail led deeper into the canyon, winding between towering rock formations. Jiwon noticed something else as they walked. The area was strangely empty. There should have been small creatures here, insects, maybe some of the rodent-like animals that usually lived in the rocks. But there was nothing. No movement, no sounds of life. "The ecosystem is dying," Jiwon said quietly, scanning the area. "Look at these plants, they're withered. The water source over there is almost dried up. Something is very wrong here." Minho checked his map. "This whole region has been declining for months. We thought it was just natural climate variation." But Jiwon's mind was racing. She pulled up data from the outpost's environmental monitors, comparing current readings to those from a year ago. The change was dramatic. Food sources had dropped by 70%. Water was scarce. The temperature fluctuations were more extreme. "It's not natural," Jiwon said, staring at the data. "This is ecological collapse, and we caused it." "What do you mean, we caused it?" Minho asked. Jiwon pulled up more files on her tablet. When the colony first arrived on Callus 7, they introduced several Earth species to help with terraforming. Plants that were supposed to stabilize the soil, insects to help with pollination. But look at this report. She showed Minho the screen. One of those species, a type of moss, has spread out of control. It's choking out the native plants. The native animals that fed on those plants are dying, and the predators that fed on those animals, like the Velhari, are starving. Minho was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "So you're saying the mother abandoned Lumi because she was starving? Because we destroyed her food supply?" "Yes," Jiwon said. "That's exactly what I'm saying." They continued following the tracks. The mother's trail showed signs of exhaustion. Her steps were uneven, dragging in places. She had stopped several times to rest. In one spot they found where she had tried to hunt one of the few remaining animals in the area. The carcass was small, barely enough for a single meal. "She was desperate," Jiwon said, her voice tight with emotion. She stayed with Lumi as long as she could, but she was dying too. She had to choose between feeding her baby and dying herself, or leaving Lumi and surviving to potentially have more offspring in the future. Minho looked uncomfortable. "That's a hell of a choice to have to make." "It's not a choice any mother should have to make," Jiwon said firmly. "And we caused it. Humans did this." Back at the outpost, Jiwon spent hours going through environmental data. The more she learned, the angrier she became. The ecological damage wasn't limited to the shattered canyons. It spread across hundreds of square kilometers. The Velhari population in the region had declined by half in just 2 years. And there were reports, buried in old files, of other abandoned Velhari young being found dead in the wilderness. Yun found her in the research lab late that night. Lumi was sleeping in a makeshift nest Jiwon had created, her scales glowing softly in the dim light. The infant had grown stronger over the past 2 days. She could lift her head now, and made happy chirping sounds when Jiwon came near. You look terrible, Hyun said, handing Jiwon a cup of coffee. I feel terrible, Jiwon admitted. She showed him what she had discovered. We're killing them, Hyun. Not with weapons or violence. We're starving them to death by destroying their environment. And they're making impossible choices because of our mistakes. Hyun sat down heavily. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. But I can't send Lumi back out there. Even if her mother returns, there's no food. They'll both die. Administrator Choi expects you to return Lumi tomorrow, Hyun reminded her. You're running out of time. Jiwon looked at the sleeping infant. In just 2 days, Lumi had already begun to recognize her. The baby would reach for Jiwon when she came close, would settle more peacefully when Jiwon held her. There was trust. There. A bond forming between two completely different species. I need more time, Jiwon said. I need to find a solution that saves Lumi and helps the other Vilhari too. That's asking for a lot, Hyun said gently. Maybe. But we owe them that much. We destroyed their world. The least we can do is try to fix it. Minho entered the lab without knocking. His face was grim. We have a problem. A big one. What is it? Jiwon asked. Perimeter sensors just picked up a large Vilhari approaching the outpost. Adult female matching the size and heat signature of the mother from the canyon. Minho paused. She's heading straight for us. Jiwon's blood ran cold. She looked at Lumi, who was still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger approaching. How long do we have? Hyun asked. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. Minho's hand rested on his weapon. Administrator Choi is putting the outpost on lockdown. She wants Lumi moved to the holding cells immediately. No, Jiwon said firmly. Lumi stays with me. Jiwon, be reasonable, Minho said. If that Vilhari gets in here and finds her baby with humans, she'll kill everyone in sight. Or maybe she's coming because she wants her baby back, Jiwon countered. Maybe she found food. Maybe she's recovered enough to care for Lumi again. We can't just assume she's here to attack. That's a dangerous assumption, Minho warned. Jiwon stood up, her decision made. Then I'll go out and meet her. Alone. If she wants Lumi back, she can have her. But I need to know that Lumi will survive. That's suicide, Hyun said. No, Jiwon said calmly. That's taking responsibility for what we've done. That mother made the hardest choice of her life because of human actions. The least I can do is face her and try to help. Minho and Hyun exchanged looks. They both knew there was no talking Jiwon out of this. She had made up her mind, and when Jiwon Park made up her mind, earthquakes couldn't move her. I'm coming with you, Minho said finally. As backup, but I'm staying far enough away that I don't threaten her. Jiwon nodded. It was the best compromise she could hope for. She looked down at Lumi one more time. The infant's scales pulsed with healthy blue and green light. She was so much stronger than she had been 2 days ago. Whatever happened next, at least Jiwon had saved her life. Now she just had to hope that would be enough. The outpost sirens wailed through the night air as Jiwon walked toward the main gate. She carried Lumi wrapped in a thermal blanket, the infant's weight light in her arms. Behind her she could hear Administrator Choi shouting orders, security personnel running to defensive positions. The outpost was preparing for an attack, but Jiwon didn't think this was an attack. She could feel it in her bones. This was a mother searching for her child. All personnel to safe zones, Choi's voice boomed over the intercom. Seal all doors. Prepare defensive measures. This is not a drill. Minho walked beside Jiwon, his rifle held ready but pointed at the ground. I still think you're crazy, he muttered. But I respect it. Thanks, Jiwon said. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She had to be calm for Lumi. The infant could sense emotions, she was sure of it. The main gate stood before them, a massive barrier of reinforced steel designed to keep Callus 7's dangerous wildlife out. Beyond it, the purple sky was dark with approaching night, and somewhere out there in that darkness a Vilhari mother was coming. Open the gate, Jiwon said into her comm unit. There was silence on the other end. Then Choi's voice sharp and angry. Absolutely not. Dr. Park, you will return to the secure zone immediately. With respect, Administrator, I'm going out there whether you open the gate or not. You can open it and let me walk through, or I can climb the fence and probably hurt myself. Your choice. More silence. Then the gate began to grind open slowly, just wide enough for a person to pass through. Hyun's voice came through her earpiece private channel. Please be careful. I still need my best friend. I will be, Ji-won promised. She looked at Minho. Stay here. If things go bad, seal the gate immediately. And leave you out there? Minho shook his head. Not happening. I'm following at 50 meters, far enough that I'm not a threat, close enough to help if needed. Ji-won knew better than to argue. She stepped through the gate into the darkness beyond. The temperature had dropped with the setting sun. Ji-won's breath made small clouds in the cold air. She walked slowly, her scanner in one hand, Lumi cradled in her other arm. The infant was awake now, making soft, curious sounds. I know, little one, Ji-won whispered. You probably recognize her scent. Your mother is close, the scanner beeped. 100 meters ahead, then 80. 60, Ji-won saw her when the distance closed to 40 meters. The Velhari mother emerged from behind a rock formation, and Ji-won's breath caught in her throat. She was massive, 3 meters tall, her body covered in scales that should have been glowing with brilliant colors. But like Lumi had been, this Velhari's scales were dim. Starvation had taken its toll. The mother stopped when she saw Ji-won. Her head tilted, studying the small human who stood alone in the darkness. Then she saw Lumi and she made a sound, a low, rumbling call that vibrated through the ground. Lumi responded immediately, chirping and squirming in Ji-won's arms. The infant wanted to go to her mother. Ji-won took a deep breath and activated her translation device. It was crude technology, only able to communicate basic concepts through a combination of sounds and projected images. She wasn't even sure it would work with a Velhari. Hello, Ji-won said, the device translating her words into a series of tones and light patterns. I am Ji-won. I found your child in the canyon. She was dying. I helped her. Made her strong again. The mother moved closer. 30 meters. 20. Ji-won could see her clearly now. She was skeletal, her ribs visible beneath the scales. Her eyes were sunken with exhaustion. There were wounds on her body, some fresh, some infected. This Velhari was barely alive herself. Ji-won slowly knelt down, placing Lumi on the ground between herself and the mother. The infant immediately tried to crawl forward, moving toward the Velhari with desperate chirps. But the mother didn't come closer. Instead, she collapsed. 3 meters of alien predator simply fell to the ground with a heavy thud. She was too weak to stand. Minho, Ji-won shouted into her comm. Medical emergency. Get Hyun out here now. She ran forward, no longer thinking about danger or protocols. This mother had walked for days without food or rest, driven by a need to find her child. She had tracked Lumi across kilometers of harsh terrain while starving and injured, and now she was dying. Ji-won reached the Velhari and knelt beside her massive head. The mother's eyes were open, watching Lumi crawl closer. She made a soft sound, a gentle rumble that made Lumi chirp happily. Stay with me, Ji-won said, even though she knew the Velhari couldn't understand. Stay with me. We can help you. We can save you both. The mother's gaze shifted to Ji-won. There was intelligence in those eyes, awareness, and something else. A question perhaps, or maybe understanding. Hyun arrived with Minho and 2 other medical staff pulling a hover gurney. They all stopped short when they saw the size of the Velhari up close. She's too big for the gurney, one of the staff members said. Then we bring equipment out here, Hyun said, already opening his medical kit. He looked at Ji-won. This is insane. We're treating a Velhari in the open. If she wakes up aggressive, she won't, Ji-won said with certainty she didn't entirely feel. She came here for Lumi. She wants her baby, not violence. Hyun began scanning the mother while the other staff set up portable monitors. The readings were grim. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple infections, internal injuries that look several days old. She should be dead, but she's not, Ji-won said. She's alive because she needed to find her baby. Lumi had reached her mother now. The infant pressed against the larger Velhari's side, making happy chirping sounds. The mother's scales flickered slightly brighter, responding to her offspring's presence. We need to get her inside, Hyun said. I can't treat her properly out here. Administrator Choi will never allow it, Minho said. Then we don't ask permission, Ji-won said firmly. We tell her we're bringing the Velhari inside and she can deal with it. You really do want to get fired, don't you? Minho said, but there was a hint of amusement in his voice. They worked for the next hour, stabilizing the mother enough to move her. It took 8 people and a cargo hauler to transport her through the gate. Choi met them at the entrance, her face red with fury. Dr. Park, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Security escort her to confinement? No, Minho said quietly. All eyes turned to him. With respect, Administrator, we're not doing that. Dr. Park is the only person who can communicate with these Velhari. She's the only one they trust. You remove her and we might have a problem. Choi's jaw clenched. This is insubordination. Yes, ma'am, it is, Minho agreed. But it's also the right thing to do. We caused this. Our terraforming destroyed their food supply. That mother had to abandon her child because of human actions. The least we can do is try to help them. For a long moment, Choi said nothing. Then she turned on her heel. Get them to medical. Dr. Kim, you're responsible for keeping them contained and healthy. Dr. Park, you have one chance. If this goes wrong, you'll spend the rest of your career cleaning waste recyclers on mining asteroids. Understood? Understood, Ji-won said, though she couldn't keep the smile off her face. They moved both Velhari to the medical bay. The mother was too large for any of the beds, so they cleared a space on the floor and surrounded her with monitoring equipment. Lumi stayed close to her mother's side, refusing to leave. Hyun worked through the night, treating the mother's infections and dehydration. They used the same nutrient formula they had developed for Lumi, just in much larger quantities. Slowly, the mother's vital signs began to stabilize. As dawn approached, Ji-won sat on the floor beside both Velhari. The mother's eyes were open, watching her. They had been watching her for the past hour. I'm sorry, Ji-won said quietly, even though she knew the Velhari couldn't understand her words. I'm sorry for what we did to your world. I'm sorry you had to make that choice. But I promise you, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure no mother has to abandon her child ever again. The Velhari mother made a sound, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through Ji-won's chest. Then slowly, deliberately, she moved her massive head closer to Ji-won. Close enough that Ji-won could have touched her. Ji-won held her breath. This was a moment of trust, a wild, dangerous predator choosing to be vulnerable with a member of the species that had nearly destroyed her. Slowly, Ji-won reached out and gently placed her hand on the mother's scaled snout. The Velhari's eyes closed, and for the first time since they brought her in, her scales began to glow just a little brighter. 3 days after bringing the mother Velhari inside, the outpost had split into 2 distinct camps. Half the personnel thought Ji-won was a hero, risking everything to save innocent lives. The other half thought she was a dangerous fool who had brought predators into their home. Ji-won didn't care what either side thought. She was too busy trying to keep both Velhari alive. The mother, whom Ji-won had started calling Vara based on patterns in her scanner readings, was recovering slowly. Her scales were brighter now, glowing with deep blues and purples when she was content. The infected wounds on her body were healing. Her ribs were less visible as she gained weight from the nutrient formula Hyun had perfected. But Vara was still weak. She spent most of her time sleeping, with Lumi curled up against her side. When she was awake, she watched everything around her with intelligent, calculating eyes. Especially Ji-won. She's studying you, Hyun said one morning as they checked Vara's vitals. See how she tracks your movements? She's learning your patterns, your behaviors. That's a good thing, Ji-won said. It means she's getting better. Her mind is sharp again. Or it means she's planning, Hyun said quietly. Ji-won, we still don't really know anything about Velhari psychology. What if she's just waiting to be strong enough to attack? Ji-won looked at Vara, who was watching them with those deep, intelligent eyes. Then why hasn't she hurt me? I've been within striking distance dozens of times. She could have killed me while I was feeding Lumi. She could have crushed me when I treated her wounds. But she hasn't, not once. Hyun had no answer to that. The trouble started on the 4th day. Ji-won was in her office going through environmental data when Minho entered without knocking. His face was grim. We have a problem. Choi just received new orders from Earth Command. Ji-won's stomach sank. What kind of orders? The kind that says both Velhari need to be removed from the outpost immediately. They're sending a containment team from the nearest military base. They'll be here in 3 days. Containment? Ji-won stood up quickly. What does that mean? Minho's silence told her everything she needed to know. They're going to kill them, Jiwon said flatly. They're going to call them dangerous, put them down, and probably dissect them for study. I don't know the details, Minho said. But Choi made it clear that we're to prepare both subjects for transport. Jiwon felt rage building in her chest. Subjects? They're not subjects. They're living beings. Farah is a mother who almost died trying to find her child. Lumi is an infant who would have died alone if I hadn't helped her. And now Earth Command wants to murder them? I'm just telling you what I heard, Minho said. But for what it's worth, I don't like it either. After Minho left, Jiwon sat at her desk, her mind racing. She had 3 days to find a solution. 3 days to save 2 lives that she had fought so hard to preserve. But what could she do? Earth Command had authority over the entire colony. They had military force. They had the law on their side, unless she could change the law. Jiwon spent the next 18 hours working on a proposal. She compiled all her environmental research, showing clearly how human terraforming had destroyed the Velhari food supply. She documented Vara's desperate search for Lumi, the terrible choice she had been forced to make. She included medical data showing that both Velhari were peaceful, non-aggressive, and capable of trust. And then she proposed something radical, a restoration project, a plan to repair the damaged ecosystem and create a sustainable food source for the remaining Velhari population, not just for Vara and Lumi, but for the entire species in the region. When she presented her proposal to the Colony Council, the room erupted in arguments. "This is beyond our authority," one council member shouted. "We're a research station, not an ecological restoration project." "This would cost millions," another added. Earth Command would never approve the budget. Administrator Choi sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Park, even if your proposal had merit, we don't have time to implement it. The containment team arrives in 2 days. Then we need to buy more time," Jiwon said firmly. "We need to show them that there's another way. That killing these Velhari isn't just wrong, it's unnecessary." "On what grounds?" Choi asked. Jiwon took a deep breath. "On the grounds that we have a moral and legal obligation to repair damage we caused. The Interspecies Protection Act is clear. If human actions directly harm an alien species, we're required to take corrective action. We destroyed their food supply. We have to fix it." The room went silent. Several council members exchanged glances. Choi leaned forward. "That's a bold interpretation of the law," she said slowly, "and it would require proof that our actions directly caused the Velhari crisis." "I have proof," Jiwon said, pulling up her data on the main screen. 2 years of environmental monitoring, direct correlation between the spread of Earth species and the decline of Velhari population. This isn't speculation, it's fact. The council debated for 3 more hours. Jiwon answered questions, showed more data, defended her proposal against every criticism. She was exhausted, running on caffeine and determination, but she didn't give up. Finally, just before midnight, Choi called for a vote. The council was split down the middle. 6 votes for the proposal, 6 against. Choi's vote would break the tie. The administrator was silent for a long moment, studying the data on the screen. Then she looked at Jiwon. "Dr. Park, if we approve this and it fails, we'll all lose our careers. You understand that?" "I understand," Jiwon said. "But if we don't try, we lose something more important. We lose our humanity." Choi's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Very well. I vote in favor. The proposal passes." The room erupted in noise, some cheering, others shouting protests. Jiwon barely heard any of it. She had bought time, but now she had to deliver results. She ran back to the medical bay where Hyun was monitoring both Velhari. "We got approval," she said breathlessly. "We can start the restoration project." "That's great," Hyun said. "But we still have another problem." Jiwon followed his gaze. Vara was sitting up, fully alert for the first time in days. Her scales were glowing brightly now, pulsing with colors that Jiwon had never seen before. Deep reds and golds mixed with the blues and purples. "What's happening?" Jiwon asked. "I don't know. Her brain activity is off the charts. It's like she's..." Hyun paused, searching for words. "It's like she's trying to communicate." Jiwon moved closer slowly. Vara's eyes locked onto hers. The Velhari made a sound, a complex series of tones that made the air vibrate. And then something incredible happened. Images flooded into Jiwon's mind. Not words, but feelings and visions. She saw the shattered canyons from Vera's perspective, saw other Velhari mothers with their young, Saw the terrible moment when Vara realized she couldn't feed Lumi anymore. Saw her desperate decision to leave her baby, hoping that death would come quickly and painlessly. And then she saw more. Other mothers making the same choice. Dozens of them across the region, forced to abandon their offspring because there was no food. Cubs dying alone in caves and canyons while their mothers watched from a distance, too weak to help. Jiwan gasped as the connection broke. Tears were streaming down her face. She showed me, Yuan whispered. She showed me everything. Vara, there are others? Other mothers like you? Vara made that complex sound again. More images came. A plea, a desperate request. Help them, save them. Not just Lumi, but all the children. She's asking for our help, Jiwon said, looking at Hyun with wonder. Not just for herself. For all her people. Hyun stared at Vara with new respect. That's not just intelligence. That's compassion. She's asking us to save children that aren't even hers. Jiwon moved closer to Vara, close enough to touch. The massive Velhari lowered her head, allowing the small human to place a hand on her scales. I promise, Jiwon said, knowing somehow that Vara understood. I promise we'll help them all. Vara's scales pulsed brighter and Jiwon felt something she couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Trust? Hope? Maybe all three. The next morning, Jiwon presented her new findings to the council. She showed them recordings of Vara's telepathic communication, showed them the images of dying cubs and desperate mothers, showed them proof that the Velhari weren't just animals, but intelligent beings capable of compassion and planning. Even the council members who had voted against her proposal looked shaken. This changes everything, one of them said quietly. Choi stood up. I'll contact Earth Command personally. We need to delay the containment team. This isn't just about two Velhari anymore. This is about an entire species that we nearly destroyed, and we're going to fix it. For the first time in days, Jiwon felt hope. The containment team from Earth Command arrived 2 days later than scheduled, and they were not happy about it. Colonel Taewoo Han, a stern man with close-cropped hair and a military bearing, stood in Administrator Choi's office demanding explanations. We were sent here to remove 2 dangerous aliens from this facility, Han said, his voice sharp. Instead, we find that not only are they still here, but you've started some kind of ecological restoration project. Explain. Choi remained calm. She had dealt with military officers before. Colonel, I invite you to review the data Dr. Park has compiled. I think you'll find it quite revealing about the nature of these dangerous aliens. Jiwon was already in the conference room, her presentation ready. She had spent the last 2 days perfecting it, knowing that this might be her only chance to save Vara and Lumi. When the colonel and his team entered, she could see the skepticism on their faces. They had come here expecting to deal with wild animals, not sit through a scientific presentation. Thank you for your time, Jiwon began, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm going to show you why killing these Velhari would be not just wrong, but a violation of the Interspecies Protection Act. She presented her evidence methodically. The environmental data showing human-caused ecological collapse. The correlation between terraforming activities and Velhari population decline. Video footage of Vera's telepathic communication, showing intelligence and compassion. Medical data proving that neither Velhari had shown any aggression despite numerous opportunities. And then she showed them something new. In the past 2 days, Vara had communicated more images, locations, coordinates. She had shown Jiwon where other Velhari mothers had abandoned their young, where food sources used to exist, where the species had lived in harmony with the environment before humans arrived. The Velhari aren't just intelligent, Jiwon said. They're trying to help us fix the problem we created. Vara has given us a roadmap to restore the entire ecosystem. She's asking us to save her species, not for revenge or anger, but because she knows we have the power to help. Colonel Han was silent for a long moment after the presentation ended. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than before. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've put down dangerous animals, removed threats, contained species that posed risks to human colonies. But I've never seen anything like this, sir, one of his subordinates asked. These aren't animals, Han said. They're people. Different from us, yes, but people nonetheless. And Dr. Park is right. We did this to them. We have an obligation to make it right. Jiwon felt relief wash over her. Then you'll support the restoration project? I'll do more than that, Han said. I'll request military resources to help. Earth Command needs to see this data. They need to understand what we're dealing with here. Over the next week, everything changed. The outpost transformed from a simple research station into the center of an unprecedented interspecies cooperation project. Military engineers arrived to help with ecosystem restoration. Biologists came to study the Velhari and learn how to help them. Supplies and equipment flooded in, but the real work was happening in the field. Jiwan led teams into the shattered canyons, using Vara's coordinates to locate abandoned Velhari cubs. They found 12 in the first 3 days. Some were still alive, barely, clinging to life just as Lumi had been. Others were too far gone. Each rescue broke Jiwan's heart a little more. These cubs should never have been abandoned. Their mothers should never have faced that impossible choice. And it was all because humans had been careless with their terraforming, had introduced species without understanding the consequences. The cubs that survived were brought back to the outpost. Hyun and his medical team worked around the clock to save them. The nutrient formula that had saved Lumi now saved others. The outpost's cargo bay was converted into a temporary nursery, filled with chirping Velhari infants. Vara helped in ways no one expected. She showed the human medical staff how to care for the cubs properly, using telepathic images to communicate what they needed. She demonstrated feeding techniques, comfort behaviors, even how to identify illness in young Velhari. She became a teacher, bridging the gap between species. One evening, Jiwan found Minho in the nursery, sitting cross-legged on the floor while 3 Velhari cubs climbed over him like he was playground equipment. The tough security chief was smiling, something Jiwan had rarely seen. "I thought you said these were dangerous predators," Jiwan teased. Minho gently moved one cub that was trying to eat his hair. "I was wrong about a lot of things." He looked up at her. "You knew, didn't you? From the moment you found Lumi, you knew they were more than just animals." "I hoped," Jiwan admitted. "But I didn't know. Not really. I just couldn't walk away." "The world needs more people like you," Minho said quietly. The restoration work continued. Teams began removing the invasive Earth species that had choked out native plants. They reintroduced native prey animals that the Velhari hunted. They created water sources and protected feeding zones. It was slow, expensive work that would take years to complete fully. But it was working. 1 month after Vera arrived at the outpost, something remarkable happened. Other adult Velhari began appearing at the perimeter. They didn't attack or threaten. They simply waited, watching the humans with cautious curiosity. Vara communicated their intentions to Jiwan. They had heard somehow about what was happening here. About humans helping Velhari cubs. About food sources being restored. About mothers who might not have to abandon their children anymore. They wanted to see if it was true. Administrator Choi approved a meeting. With Vera as intermediary and Jiwan as spokesperson, they established the first formal communication between humans and Velhari. It was clumsy at first, relying heavily on Vera's telepathic abilities and the translation devices, but gradually patterns emerged. Understanding grew. The Velhari leaders, all females as their society was matriarchal, made their position clear. They did not want war with humans. They wanted their land restored, their children safe, their species to survive. If humans could help with that, they would accept the alliance. "We're writing history here," Colonel Han said during one of the meetings. "First contact done right. Not through conquest or exploitation, but through compassion and cooperation." Hyun, who had been monitoring the health of both Velhari adults and cubs, reported encouraging news. "All the rescued cubs are gaining weight and strength. Their scales are bright. They're active and playful. And Vara, she's thriving. She's put on 20% of her body weight. Her wounds are completely healed. She's as healthy as any Velhari I've scanned." Jiwan visited Vara and Lumi every day. The bond between them had only grown stronger. Lumi, now much bigger and more active, would rush to Jiwan whenever she entered the nursery. The cub's scales would flash happy colors and she would chirp excitedly. Vara watched these interactions with what Jiwan interpreted as approval. One evening, Vara did something unexpected. She sent Jiwan a telepathic image so clear it was like watching a video. It showed Jiwan standing on a cliff top overlooking a restored canyon. Native plants grew thick and healthy. Prey animals moved through the brush. And everywhere, Velhari mothers walked with their cubs, healthy and safe, no longer facing the specter of starvation. It was a vision of the future. A promise of what could be. "We'll get there," Jiwan said aloud, even though she was alone with the Vilhari. I promise you we'll make that future real. Vara's scales pulsed with golden light. Approval. Trust. Hope. The restoration project was officially approved by Earth Command 3 weeks later. Funding was allocated for 5 years of intensive work. More personnel were being sent to help. The project would expand beyond the shattered canyons to cover the entire region. But more than that, Earth Command issued a new directive. All colonies on worlds with native intelligent species were to conduct immediate environmental impact studies. The Callus 7 protocols, as they were being called, would become the template for how humans interacted with alien life. The days of careless terraforming were over. Jiwan stood in Administrator Choi's office reading the official commendation she had received. The Xenobiological Institute wanted to award her their highest honor for her work in interspecies relations. You should be proud, Choi said. You've changed how humanity approaches first contact. That's no small achievement. I just did what anyone should have done, Jiwan said. I saw someone who needed help and I helped them. That's exactly why this matters, Choi replied. Because you're right. Anyone should have done it. But you're the one who actually did. That night, Jiwan returned to the nursery one final time before heading to her quarters. 12 Velhari cubs were sleeping in piles, their scales creating a soft, multicolored glow. Vara lay in the center, watching over them all like the protective mother she was. Lumi slept curled against her side. When Vara saw Jiwan, she made a soft rumbling sound. A greeting. A thank you. A promise of friendship. Jiwan sat down on the floor, leaning back against the wall. We still have a long way to go, she said quietly. Years of work ahead of us, but we're going to make it right. All of us together. Vara's response came as a warm feeling in Jiwan's mind. Not words, but something better. Understanding. Partnership. Hope for a future where two species could live together in harmony. Outside, the purple sky of Callus 7 glittered with stars. And 3 months had passed since Jiwan found Lumi dying in that cave, and the transformation of Callus 7 was remarkable. The shattered canyons, once a dying wasteland, were showing signs of recovery. Native plants grew in clusters throughout the region. Small prey animals had returned to their traditional territories, and, most importantly, the Velhari were thriving. Jiwan stood at the canyon overlook, the same spot where she had collected samples all those months ago. The view was different now. Instead of empty, lifeless rocks, she saw movement everywhere. Velhari mothers walked through the canyon with their cubs, no longer starving, no longer desperate. The cubs played and explored while their mothers hunted successfully for the first time in years. Beautiful, isn't it? Hyun said, walking up beside her. Hard to believe this is the same place. We did this, Jiwan said, her voice full of wonder. We actually did it. You did it, Hyun corrected. None of this would have happened if you hadn't refused to walk away from Lumi that day. Jiwan shook her head. It wasn't just me. It was you keeping both of them alive. It was Minho supporting us even when it was dangerous. It was Administrator Choi making hard decisions. It was Colonel Han choosing compassion over protocol. All of us together. A familiar chirping sound made them both turn. Lumi came bounding up the path, her scales flashing brilliant blues and greens. She was nearly twice the size she had been when Jiwan found her, healthy and strong and full of energy. Behind her, moving with more dignity, came Vara. Lumi rushed to Jiwan and nuzzled against her leg affectionately. Jiwan laughed and scratched behind the cub's auditory ridges, a spot that always made Lumi's scales shimmer with pleasure. She still thinks you're her mother, Hyun observed. I think she knows Vara is her mother, Jiwan said. But maybe she thinks she has 2 mothers now. One Velhari, one human. Is that so strange? Vara approached and made her rumbling greeting sound. Over the months, Jiwan had learned to interpret many of the Velhari vocalizations. This one meant friendship and gratitude. Vara's telepathic images came less frequently now, but when they did, they were clearer and more complex. The bond between human and Velhari had deepened into something neither species had expected. A message notification chimed on Jiwan's tablet. She read it quickly and smiled. The last of the rescued cubs has been cleared for return to the wild. All 12 survived. All of them are healthy. That's incredible, Hyun said. A 100% survival rate. I honestly didn't think we'd manage that. Their mothers didn't think they'd survive at all, Jiwan said quietly. That's why they left them. But we proved that another way was possible. Over at the outpost, now expanded to twice its original size, preparations were underway for something unprecedented. The first official treaty between humans and Velhari would be signed today. It had taken months of communication, with Vara and 2 other Velhari matriarchs serving as representatives for their species. The treaty established protected zones for the Velhari, guaranteed continued restoration efforts, and created a framework for peaceful coexistence. Administrator Choi, who had been promoted to regional coordinator for her handling of the situation, presided over the ceremony. Representatives from Earth Command were present via video link. News media from across human space watched the live broadcast. This treaty represents more than just an agreement between 2 species, Choi said to the assembled crowd. It represents a new philosophy for humanity. We acknowledge that our actions have consequences for other intelligent species. We accept responsibility for harm we've caused, and we commit to being better neighbors to all life in the galaxy. The Velhari matriarchs, including Vara, stood on one side of the ceremonial platform. They didn't sign papers or use pens. Instead, they each touched a crystal tablet that recorded their biosignatures and telepathic assent. It was their way of making binding agreements, and humans had learned to respect it. When Vara placed her clawed hand on the tablet, her scales pulsed with golden light. Through the telepathic link she maintained with G1, a feeling of profound hope washed over everyone in range. Some of the human observers found themselves crying without quite knowing why. After the ceremony, there was a celebration. It was a strange affair, with humans and Velhari sharing the same space for the first time in a social context. The Velhari didn't eat human food, and humans couldn't process Velhari nutrients, but they gathered together anyway. Music played. Children, both human and Velhari young, played together under the watchful eyes of both species. Minho stood at the edge of the gathering, watching a group of young Velhari cubs chase each other in a game that looked remarkably like tag. One of his security officers, a young woman named Soman, stood beside him. "I never thought I'd see this," Soman said. "When I came to Callus 7, they told us the Velhari were dangerous monsters. But look at them. They're just people. Different people, but still people." Dr. Park saw that from the beginning, Minho said. She looked past what we'd been told and saw the truth. That's a rare gift. Across the gathering, G1 was surrounded by news reporters wanting interviews. She had become famous across human space, the xenobiologist who had changed everything. Universities wanted her as a speaker. Research institutes offered her prestigious positions. She had turned them all down. Her work was here, on Callus 7, helping to ensure the restoration continued. Dr. Park, what would you say to those who still believe humans should avoid contact with alien species? One reporter asked. G1 thought for a moment before answering. I would say that we can't avoid contact. We're out here in the galaxy, living on worlds that were already home to other species. The question isn't whether we'll interact with alien life. The question is how we'll interact. Will we be conquerors and destroyers? Or will we be neighbors and friends? The choice is ours. And what about the argument that helping the Velhari sets a dangerous precedent? That it will be too expensive to help every species we encounter? I think the dangerous precedent is deciding that some lives don't matter, because helping them is inconvenient or expensive. G1 replied. Yes, restoration work is costly, but the cost of letting an entire species die because of our mistakes? That's a price too high to pay. We measure our humanity not by how we treat those who are like us, but by how we treat those who are different. The interview continued, but G1's attention was pulled away by a familiar chirping. Lumi had found her way through the crowd and was tugging at G1's sleeve with her mouth. The cub wanted to play. G1 excused herself from the reporters and followed Lumi to a quieter area. Vara was there, along with several other adult Velhari and their cubs. They had formed a circle, and in the center the cubs were demonstrating something, a dance perhaps, or a ritual. Their scales flashed in synchronized patterns, creating waves of color. Vara sent G1 a telepathic image. This was how young Velhari learned, through these coordinated displays. They were teaching the next generation the history of their people, and now that history included the humans who had saved them. The cubs were learning a new dance, one that told the story of Vara's desperate search, of the human who found her dying baby, of the mother who was saved by those she had been taught to fear. G1 watched with tears in her eyes. They weren't just saving lives, They were creating a shared history, a foundation for future generations of both species to build upon. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Ji-won returned to her quarters. She was exhausted but happy. Her tablet showed dozens of messages from former colleagues, from the Xenobiological Institute, from people across human space thanking her for what she'd done. But one message stood out. It was from a small colony on the other side of the galaxy. They had found an abandoned alien infant from a species native to their world. The colony administrator was asking for advice. What should they do? How had Ji-won handled it? Ji-won smiled and began typing her response. She explained the nutrient formula, the communication techniques, the importance of understanding why the infant had been abandoned in the first place. But most importantly, she told them not to give up, no matter how difficult it seemed. Every life matters, she wrote, and every act of compassion creates ripples that spread farther than we can imagine. Save that infant. Learn from its species. Build bridges instead of walls. That's how we become the humans we're supposed to be. She sent the message and looked out her window. The purple sky of Callus 7 was clear tonight, filled with stars. On other worlds, under other skies, humans were making choices. Some would choose the easy path, the safe path, the path of isolation and fear. But others, inspired by what had happened here, would choose differently. They would choose compassion. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Vara standing there, too large to fit through the doorway. Behind her, Lumi peeked around her mother's leg. "Hello," Ji-won said. "What brings you here?" Vara sent a telepathic image. It showed the three of them together, human and Velhari, standing at the canyon overlook. The image shifted, moving forward in time. Ji-won saw herself,